In a world that's always racing forward, sometimes we need to slow down and reconnect.
Connect genuinely, broaden your perspective, and share your passion.
Bona fide dialogues, where authenticity, creativity, and passion merge.
Okay, I have been asked so many times who's behind the voice on my podcast. So today we can reveal it, right? Please meet Johnny.
Hello.
Yeah, so many people asked me about you. And I said, I haven't even met him in person. I'm happy that our listeners can meet you today and learn more about you and what you do in your life as a voiceover actor.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting jobs, isn't it? That you don't know too many people in real life who do it. But it's my pleasure to be here and to. I hope when those put a face to the voice, I hope it's not too much of a disappointment.
Of course not.
With over 300 audiobook titles under his belt, as well as weekly audios on Quinn, John is no stranger to using his voice to tell stories. From working with publishers such as HarperAudio and DisneyBooks to the best in independent distribution, John brings color and creativity to captivate listeners all over the globe. Whether it's via his home studio in the rural English countryside or from an on-location studio, John strives for nothing but the best in his performance and service. He has a deep desire for storytelling and exploring narratives that capture the hearts and souls of his listeners, as well as providing free interviews with the very best in the industry as part of the Audiobook Club podcast.
Can you tell me about your journey into this career? What inspired you to become a voiceover actor, narrator?
Yeah, sure. So really, I didn't set out to be in my field. I landed here purely by chance, which is how a lot of great things come to us. So my education was actually in TV and film production. And that's very much where I saw myself going. I did enjoy acting and performing when I was a little bit younger than that, but I thought, and it turns out this was totally wrong, that it was more of a realistic job to go for behind the scenes, which I later found out is just as hard to end up in film production than it is actually in front of the camera. So I did my education, and I was training to be a cinematographer. So that's what I was looking into do. And then once I left college, I started getting some camera assistant jobs. So worked in various TV shows and some feature films shot up here in the north of England, which is where I'm based. There aren't too many of those happening, but the ones that were, I did manage to break onto as a camera assistant. And then after a string of jobs, either production assistant or camera assistant in those roles, I landed a gig as a camera operator, which was a big score up for me, for a local TV show, which was in Hull, which is a city in the UK, just on the east coast, and that show was covering what's called the City of Culture. So it's I think it's Europe based, but essentially somebody, I don't know who, picks a city in Europe and says this is going to be the city of culture for this year, and they get a load of
I like
money.
that idea.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. And for some reason, I can't get my head around. They chose Hull. That's a little joke. I'm from there, so it's okay. I can say. But so they chose Hull, and there was a TV show set up to follow the year, because there were so many exhibitions, so many local artists doing amazing things. So we set up this TV show. And I was camera operating. And then a few episodes into it, I was asked if I wanted to go to more of the assistant producer role and produce what's called packages. So little films to be embedded into that episode. Did that, loved it. Ended up presenting the show for a little bit, and essentially just had a whale of a time throughout this specific year. And around the back end of that year, the production company started setting up a sound studio which was in the middle of a really busy shopping centre called Princess Quay. Now, for those who are aware of working with audio, a really busy shopping centre or a shopping mall is not the best place to put a sound studio. We found that out a little bit later. So unfortunately, the studio couldn't be there for very long, and for a load of other things that happened, which I'll save you for. But essentially, during those opening weeks of that studio, we would bring actors in to audition for commercials, voiceover gigs, and audiobooks. And myself and my sister, who was also working as a producer on that show, all the actors went home one night, and we were packing up everything, and there was an audition that fit me. And being a little bit sort of calling back to my acting days, I thought, do you know what, I'm going to get in, I'm going to do it, I think I can do a good audition. So we went away, I did the audition, sent it in, and a few days later I got the gig. And so we did that, and to be totally truthful to you, my work on that show was coming to an end. My work with that production company was coming to an end. And the audiobook that I got paid more than I got paid on the last one. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I could do a few of these to tide me over, until the next TV production gig. And then essentially I got another one, another audiobook, and another audiobook, and another audiobook, and so on and so on. And I haven't made my return to the TV. I've just carried on doing it. And from audiobooks, there's been a load of other twists and turns added to it. But then, but I was narrating audiobooks full time for 2 years before I even said to myself, oh, this might be something that I want to do.
You didn't even realize that it became your career.
Yeah, really. And so it was quite a unique situation to be in. I was always just doing it just until something else came along. And then, but unbeknownst to me as well, I fell in love with that process. I fell in love with the storytelling aspect of it. And then after those 2 years, and this is very shameful for me to admit, after those 2 years, I thought I better really start getting serious about this and really sort of learning the trade and learning the learning. So
learning on the job is the best way to learn, by actually doing it.
I think so. But it's been a blast, and now I can say confidently that this is where I feel that I belong, and I'm happy in this space.
This is not the first time I hear that people say that it took me a couple of years just to start calling myself a poet or a writer. I was just doing it as a hobby, but when you're being paid for something you do, it's not hobby.
No,
in your instance, it's been a career from the day one, right?
Yeah, it was. I haven't done any. I don't think I've done any sort of voluntary stuff. It's all been, quote unquote professional. So I've been very fortunate in that regard, because that's not the case in this industry. It's so difficult to get gigs, and it is. And don't get me wrong, I've been turned down for more books. I've been turned down for 5 times the amount of books that I've done.
It just tells that it doesn't fit the book, right? It doesn't tell you anything about the actor. Not every project is the right project for you, right? You may turn down projects as well.
Yeah, I think less than I turn down less than people turn down me, I think. But but no, you're absolutely right, and I think that's the really nice thing about this industry, is specifically in narration, but then also in other voice acting gigs. It's nothing personal. It's just you don't fit the role, and that's okay. So you just move on.
I like that approach, definitely.
Yeah,
and I think in the last 10 years, this industry been growing so rapidly. Now every book somebody writes, having an audiobook, it's a must, right? And I see that many authors actually narrate their own books, and it's such a hard work. I wouldn't be able to do it. I have one audiobook, for my children's book, and somebody else did it for me, Pro Audio Voices. Amazing company, and with so many talented actors. They did an amazing job. I wouldn't be able to do anything like that. So what do you think about authors narrating their own books?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. And you know, I think if you can do it, there's a few things that I would ask an author. If an author came to me and said, I'm thinking about narrating it myself, I would make sure that they understood all of the components that go into it. And that may sound a little bit dramatic to those not familiar with the process, but the idea that narrating an audiobook is just sitting down and reading a book aloud is so far from the truth. I wish it were that easy. My life would be a lot easier if it were that easy. But
I
it's
can
a
imagine how difficult it is, definitely. And
yeah,
you don't do it in one setting, right? One day you came in one mood, another day in another mood, and your voice sounds different. And for the listeners, will be, what happened? You can
yeah.
feel the difference between yesterday and today, but
Oh
it's like
yeah.
in the middle of chapter. That's
Oh
what
yeah.
that's what comes to my mind. But
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
there are
even the
probably so many more
logistics.
issues.
Yeah, I mean, the logistics of like little things like keeping your voice consistent is a real challenge, or it can be a real challenge. So for little things like if you're going to do it every day, like I do, I'm in the booth about 6 days a week usually, narrating, and I narrate from around 4 to 5 hours actually in the studio. And that usually gets between 2 hours, maybe 2 hours and a half of usable. So we call it finished, but it means
Yeah.
usable time. So it's about half, which is a pretty good rate, to be fair. So yeah, I mean, making sure that your voice is consistent. At the end of the day, you're on a deadline, so you are going to sound different in the slightest things, and maybe your engineer can be your hero with that, or maybe it's
Mm.
just a unfortunately that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. But it is something to consider. But I think the biggest thing, I mean, you have the actual performance element of it, and when I say performance, you might, even if you're just doing a what you would call a normal read, it's like a
Yeah.
non-fiction, very sort of toned down. It's still a performance, and you've got to, your pacing is very much to be considered, and all of these things are a lot harder to do, especially for if you've got a 7, 8, 9, 10 hour book. It's very difficult to keep it up and keep it consistent.
And I
So
can
that's what I would
imagine the
sort of say.
difference between fiction and non-fiction. It's
Yeah, I
almost
mean,
impossible to do fiction because you're changing your voice for each character, right? And it's so hard to be consistent again.
yeah, most of the time you are. Again, there are some odd occasions. I don't want to say odd occasions, but there are a few occasions where you are asked to sort of tone it down a little bit. So there's a wonderful narrator called Scott Brick, who's a legend to all of us narrators. But he has a very sort of what you would call like toned down narration style in terms of his characters. His prose are very, I'm not saying that he's boring. He's nothing but exciting. But for his character works a little different. These days, I would say that it is more common than not to be expected to do the full voice, the accents,
Yeah.
try and make it sound like it's a different character completely, which, yeah, it transforms the level of complexity of that job.
Especially
But
for
it's
children's
also,
books, I
oh,
think you
yeah,
can do that. Yes, but for a
yeah.
longer book, it's very hard to do. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's acting.
Yeah, and it really is a performance. And then this is the thing that I've worked with my entire career, and I think I'm getting better at it now. But it's like the idea of, even though it's a performance, you kind of got to pretend that it's not, because the last thing. So
Mm.
most people listen to audiobooks with headphones on. A lot of people are listening to audiobooks to get them to sleep. What they don't want is somebody like being, if you can imagine, like a children's TV show, like a
Too
children's TV show
animated.
host. Yeah, so like out there, so
Mhm.
because they're so sort of off-putting, and it grains on the ear very fast. So even though it's a performance, you've got to tone it down even still.
Shouldn't
So
sound like you're acting. Yes, it should sound
yeah.
natural.
Yeah, I suppose so. And yeah, I mean, you approach every book differently, because the different publishers, different authors want different things. Um, so you have like the Disney books, particularly like the Star Wars books. They're very theatrical. They have the sound effects, the music, and one of the narrators do that is one of my personal favorites, a guy called Mark Thompson, and he is magical, but he brings that that
Yeah.
theater to the book. Whereas if you're going to do like a thriller, or a detective novel, a noir novel, it's not going to be like that tone. It's going to be a lot more sort of somber, perhaps a lot more sort of gritty, and maybe, you could even say realistic in some respects. So it's it's a minefield.
I know, I know. And do people specialize in specific genre?
They do, yeah. I mean, well, I'd say that most of us get, I mean, call it specialize or call it typecast or whatever you want to, however you want to sort of phrase it. But yeah, most of us do find that we're doing similar sort of stuff more often than not. So like, although I don't, there's very little that I won't do if I like the story. But for me personally, it's more in the romance genre, and then in that romance, so I typically get like boy next door characters, like the kind of best friend turned to lover sort of stories, just because of the way that I sound. I haven't got like a deep, gritty, quote unquote, like sexy voice going on there, so I
But
don't
you
get
have
those gigs.
different voices. Like for my
Yeah.
podcast, this is not the same voice you use right now, right?
Yeah, and that's it. It's yeah, I mean that to be honest, for things like that, that just comes on naturally when you're in there. So like I have a very strange accent naturally. So like I have a hybrid between like a more southern English accent, and then I'll slip into a broad Yorkshire accent when I'm not thinking about it, essentially. So like I'll say certain words like place, and like I'll say that very posh, and then you'll say like, laugh, and I'll sort of flip like flip between the two. So whenever I do something like a piece for a podcast or a voiceover thing, I'll just shift that a little bit and make it more sort of general, either one way or the other, and less of a blend between the two. So I think that's where that comes from. I think.
So how do you turn on and turn off that persona? You walk into your booth, and how do you get into this mindset of, prepare yourself for narrating?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. So it really depends on what you're doing. So for the audiobooks and for most like script work, there isn't too much sort of going on before you do that. I mean, there's not much sort of getting into a character. You're
You don't
reading
need
off the
to
manuscript.
meditate before you start.
No, no. Although yoga's pretty good, but only because you're sitting down for a long time, and you could say the same about working in an office. But I'm going to pretend just for this podcast that I do yoga every day, but I do skip a lot. Yeah. So things like that is a good idea. You do like warm ups. Now you can have like elaborate warm-up routines that are an amazing idea, and they're great in theory. And if you do that every day, then all the power to you. Um, I get a little bit lazy after every so often, so that warm-up turns into a conversation, and then maybe just like a little bit of a mess around with. But yeah, so as long as you've sort of spoken for at least a good 20-30 minutes maybe before getting into the booth, so you're warmed up, so you don't get that first like morning voice.
You call your friend, they need to warm up. Let's
Yeah,
chat over
yeah.
the
Oh yeah, genuinely, yeah. There's I've had many phone calls with people just out of the blue, like narrators and voice actors, and then about 10 minutes in, you're like, You're using me as a warm up, aren't you?" Like, but yeah, so that's really it. But I think that the only exception to like your headspace, and I think we're going to get into this in a little bit, but the work that I do on Quinn is completely different. You have to get into a very specific mindset. What Quinn specifically do, is they on that platform is that creators will create sort of romantic or erotic experiences that are truly unique to that platform. It's really incredible what some of the creators are doing. So how I became involved in that is so I was doing romance audiobooks for about 7 years. And then I got an email from Caroline who asked if I was aware of Quinn and interested in what they were doing, which I was before then. And I was very excited to see what they were doing. Truthfully, I had no idea how to even get into that line of work. I didn't know anybody who was doing it and all that sort of thing. So I jumped at the chance and said, "Yeah, please, I'd love to have a crack at this." And it's become one of my favorite things to do in the world. Like it's the work is so rewarding. You do one a week, or I do anyway. Do a weekly
And you have to
audio, and
write your
it's
own scripts, right?
you do it. You do everything. Yeah. So you write the story, you produce it, and then you do the post production, and then send it off, and then it's enjoyed and hopefully enjoyed by the audience. And it's so rewarding and so creatively stimulating. I can't tell you anything like it.
I looked at the website and I see creators. So mostly these are actors, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just anyone can become creator. So these are
No.
professional creators.
Yeah, they are. So I mean, the creators come from a varied background. It's really interesting. You have traditional actors of both stage and screen. You have voice actors and audiobook narrators like myself, and then you have people from all walks of life who the one thing that we all share is just this passion for this work, this passion for this medium, and enjoys, telling stories. And that's one thing, even though we come from all different areas of the world, both figuratively and literally, this combined like passion makes it incredible. But the audience, I think, is mostly it's a mostly female audience, but there are creators who make it, for everybody and anybody and all of that. So it's not just solely for women, but it is a big female audience. My most played audio is like a friendship turned lover thing, as we've been saying. So the idea is that it's my character comes clean about always having fantasized about this his friend who is the listener, and fantasized about always getting together and can't take it anymore, has to come clean. This is my, like, I think I'm in love with you, and and then it goes forth. And I think that, whether, I don't know how deeply you want to look into it. And I think that, a listener will look as deeply as they want to. Maybe it has always been a fantasy, or maybe it's not, and they're just sort of dipping into it and things. But what it allows you to do is sort of enjoy that flavor of story at a safe distance.
How do you come up with those stories?
It's tough. It's by far like the hardest part of the whole gig is to do it. I mean, luckily, like I don't have much trouble coming up with ideas, and it can become, an idea can spark from just about anywhere, but it's more like I'll come up with the idea, and then I'll sort of workshop it as if, like, can I tell a good story from this area? So it's like, in terms of like fantasies and stuff, I'm not particularly looking at fantasies. I'm looking at, like, does this make a good story? Does it work? And is it something that I can relate to? Because because once you get your
Not from the psychological point of view, not trying to research women and what they're interested in. You're coming from a different perspective. You're trying to kind of just tell the story. It's a storytelling. You imagine yourself in the situation. I'm just curious about the process, the creative process.
Yeah, you're very much right. I think it comes more than so, like, there's no sort of research going about what people like, and there's going to be a lot of people who won't resonate with my audios and won't like them, and that's totally fine. They're not for everybody, but really the only way that I can do it is to be honest with myself, look inwards, and sort of say, what sort of things what stories do I like to tell? What do I find attractive in a certain area, and then hopefully someone will agree with you and enjoy it as well.
I don't think we think about voices as much as we should. People are so focused, generally speaking, again, on appearances, but people are attracted to one another on so many different levels. First of all, it's energy that we give out. Sometimes it's just the way you are, the way you speak, and the way you sound. So there's so many things, and I think voice is one of those things that we do not talk about, but sometimes somebody would look so attractive, but then you start talking to them, and the way they sound and how fast they speak or slow, all of that can affect the way we feel about the person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something like going back to audiobook narration that we do all the time for characters, you know. And it's, you know, to put it really simply, to give you a really basic example, if someone's nervous and unsure, they speak very quickly, usually, because they're trying to find the right words or they're trying to block your ears up so that you don't realize that they don't actually know what they're saying. You know, so the way that we speak often interprets the way that we feel, so we can use that for characters. If we're sort of very confident, very sure of ourselves, perhaps an older established person, we might speak a little bit slower because we know that with each word it holds depth, and we know that you
I
will
must be
benefit from
getting
hearing.
I must be getting
Yeah.
older because I get nervous when people speak too fast. Like I feel how
Yeah.
I feel inside. I like more like slower uh,
Yeah.
speech
It's,
patterns.
you can adapt, like, you know, you can adapt that and use that for storytelling, which is a really good idea. But it's
And
it also
generally in
just,
life, yeah.
yeah, and just to go back to your first question about the about whether authors should narrate their own things, which they should absolutely do it if they want to. But that's things too. It's things like that that you know they need to be aware of as well in terms of creating characters for people. That it isn't just your tone of voice or like, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So it's but yeah, all of that goes into consideration as well.
So do you think you will continue working as a voiceover actor, as narrator, or do you think there's a room for you to shift into actual acting at some point in your life?
I feel most rewarded like creatively from it, which is a big thing. And like, so the idea of like being paid like decent money to be creative all the time, like that's your job. I mean, that's the dream, you know. So I can't really think of shifting it because I'm like, oh, this is what I wanted to do. So I'm at this point in my life, I'm sort of sitting in the pool and going, oh, look at this, look at what I get to do.
That's
And I hope
interesting.
that,
And you have
yeah.
this large fan base now, right? How do you feel about it?
The community around either Quinn and also the like the book talk world as well, like that whole community, and specifically the community who you know have found themselves sort of gathered around my work, is just the most amazing thing I've ever laid my little eyes on. It's unbelievable, you know, how kind and generous these people are. And what's the most amazing thing is that they sort of, or most of them, sort of discovered me separate to each other as strangers, and through either my Patreon or through like comment sections on social media, if you can believe, has like formed friendships with each other. And like that's just like that's what makes the world go round, you know. It's unbelievable. It's so cool.
You just said that you're doing right now in this stage of your life, you're doing what you really love.
Yeah.
You're excited about your community, about actual work you're doing.
Mhm.
The question I have, do you think this profession has a future in light of latest development in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I mean, you can sort of say that about anything, um, you know, because you have no idea what's safe or what's not. And my sneaky suspicion is that nothing's safe. You know, if you sort of use a computer for a living, in about 15 years, you might be a bit redundant, myself included. So it's a very scary sort of time to be there. And the truth is, I have no idea. I hope so because I don't know what any of us are going to
OpenAI
do.
right now is coming up
Mhm.
voice over for their chat GPT, and
Yeah,
they're creating different voices for personal assistants for
yeah,
people. And I can imagine narrating a book before we know using artificial intelligence for narrating a book will be here. But I still think that the way human can narrate the book, I don't think AI can mirror that.
I think you're right. I agree right now. And there's certain nuances that they still don't get, and hopefully they won't. But I think we'll give it a few years, and they probably will do. I'm not sure. I hope not. But you know,
For
the
young
speed that
people,
AI
right,
is.
who want to pursue career as a voiceover
Mhm.
actor, what would you tell
Yeah.
them?
Um, go for it. If it's right now, still go for it because it's amazing. If it's what you want to do, but I think it's also like if someone, and this goes for anything, like not just voice acting or audio narration, but if somebody comes up to me and says, or should I do this, and I said no, and that stopped them from doing it, then they were going to quit anyway. Because this work, like, is so, you get so many no's and you get turned away, just like any profession. You want to be a lawyer, there's so many things in your way that you have to break down. You got to be tough. So if somebody said don't do it, and then you went, oh, fair enough, I won't, then you weren't going to do it anyway. But I think it's, in terms of like AI, my own personal feelings for it is just frustration, because I think we're ruining all of the good stuff, we're ruining all of the fun stuff, because people like artists and things, AI art, drawing's fun. Having an artist is fun. Being an artist, enjoying something because somebody's made it's really fun. It's the same with music and stuff. Like, get AI to do my dishes for me.
Exactly. Watch the course, do the dishes,
I think,
and we will be creative.
Yeah, and it's just like, I think, not that it will, and it's just me moaning about it, but it's like, at what point do you say just because we can, does it mean that we should? Because there's loads of stuff that we could do, but it's bad for us. There's so many things. There's so many things that we have the option to do that we don't, because we know it's negative. And I think that businesses should try and think about that as well. But
I think it's an amazing point you just made, an amazing point, because having this good technology and being able to navigate it and use it for good, I think that's the key.
I would agree with you. I think that it should be, people should be held accountable for doing things that could negatively impact the world, but I don't think they will be. I don't know. I'm a little bit sort of anti people, robots doing everything for you. If I'm honest with you, or at least do the things like
moving
be my
boxes,
chauffeur.
right? But doing art,
Yeah.
let us enjoy the art.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all for the AI vacuum cleaner that goes and hoovers my house. All for that one. You go for it. But leave the art stuff and leave the fun. But then also you're going to get to a point where it's like, we need to do things to be healthy, like, as human beings, right? We need to have a task. I mean, even if you're like, that you need to keep yourself somewhat busy, otherwise you start to lose your faculties, and you don't want, this. We've got to keep our lives open a little bit,
Right. And I think we let economy and this economic decisions guide us, because they would say, oh, AI can narrate the book for cheap in minutes, and I have to pay so much money and wait so long for a human to do that. So what I wanted to say, that often it's about money.
Yeah, I mean,
Unfortunately.
I mean, I imagine, like, if we're talking about like right now, if this was right now, I would say, yeah, but you pay for it to be really good, and if you want, like, that's essentially what you're paying for. You're paying for someone to be good, to do it in a good job. What I would say in the future, because you will have to pay, even if it's AI narrated and stuff, you will have to pay them, but they pay as some sort of corporation. But like, how personal is your book to you? How personal are those characters? How much do those characters mean to you? And how much can you tell? Like, one of the most amazing things about
I feel that. I think you're saying exactly what needs to be said right here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing things about working as an audiobook narrator is talking with authors and consulting with authors about their characters. And they love them so much because they've spent the last 10 years with these characters, and they have a very specific voice. They sound a very specific way, and they want to get it in the exact right thing. Whereas when you work with the real person, they'll have a conversation with, like you and I are doing right now, and they'll say, this is how they sound, and they will show me, and then I go out and get to do it in that way. So like that level of care is what you pay for. And like right now, it's the production, it's the quality and everything. But I think that a listener of anything or an enjoyer of any medium can really tell when people care about the thing that they've created. and I think that's a lot of the reason, not to go off topic or anything, but that's a lot of the reasons why people get frustrated with modern movies right now, is because it doesn't seem to have, oh, like, not everything, but a lot of the movies right now that are coming out seem so sort of formulaic that they don't, it's like nobody cares anymore. And so not saying that every person's like passion piece is a banger, it's not, but I think that I think people do care.
We
I
need
think when
more
people do,
soulful movies.
yeah, I think so, because what's the point if not? I mean, that's the whole idea of it.
Yeah, you need
Try.
to feel something. It has to be funny. It has to be, sad or scary
Yeah,
or whatever. You have to feel something. Then you watch that movie.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have so many movies in Europe? We're here, it's like we live in this bubble. We have Hollywood, but I know I grew up in Eastern Europe. Uh, there's so many movies, Italian movies, in many,
Yeah.
many different countries. They're produced amazing movies, and I think most Americans are not exposed to them.
Yeah, I could say the same for the UK as well. It's like mostly we consume mostly American-made programming, but then just UK based as well. But I mean, there's I imagine more movies than I could fit into my life that come from Europe or other places that are amazing. Like I haven't even started on Indian film and all. I bet
Yeah,
there's
I
some
grew up watching
corker stuff.
Indian
Yeah.
movies. Yeah,
Oh,
they're
did you?
amazing. Yeah.
But there you go. I'm missing out on it all. So there's only so much we can fit
They
into
sing
to our
and
day.
dance. It's a lot of
Yeah,
fun, very colorful,
yeah,
beautiful movies. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I
They're
need
not
to.
very popular
Need to
here in the US, unfortunately.
mm,
Yeah, that was a good example. Indian movies, yes. So the
yeah,
whole different world. They have their own Bollywood.
yeah. It's interesting. I think also it's like people shouldn't feel too bad about it because we watch what's on. If it was all on Netflix, then you could do. Or if it's all on like TV or like however you consume your media, if it's there in front of you, it's not. And you could do it, but it's most of the time it's not, and you have to dig deep. So, and a lot of us don't have the time. We'll watch whatever's on the first few things that come up. You go, yeah, that looks all right. Stick that on, and
Mhm.
then
And you
so
read a lot. If you narrated more than 300 books,
mm,
I can only imagine how many books you read in your lifetime. Would you
I,
recommend some of your favorites to my listeners?
yeah, of course. Well, classics. People who subscribe to my Patreon will laugh at this because I talk about it a lot. But I think I genuinely think, in my personal opinion, the best book ever written is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I think that trumps any self-help novel that you can get right now, or self-help book, I should say. But yeah, so Meditations at the top for Marcus Aurelius. If you haven't been exposed to Marcus Aurelius before, I would suggest it. Excuse me. Personal favorites: the entire David Sedaris collection, his diaries, his essays. Just everything that guy does. I'm a huge fan of. I'm a big fan of Matt Haig, Lisa Oliver. Yeah, so I'm
Do you
trying to
read
go through.
actual books or ebooks nowadays?
Mostly still physical books for personal, but I have just got a Kindle, so it's yeah. I'm jumping on that e-reader train, and then for the
And
obviously
you
for the work.
listen, I assume, to the books.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yes, I do. Yeah, I'm a big fan of audiobooks as well. I think that sometimes though, if you can often sort of point out like where the edits have taken place in the book, because you're
That's
so
what I
attuned to it.
wanted to know. Can you
Yeah.
just listen to the book and immerse yourself, or you just listening from your professional point of view? Oh, he should have said this differently, or kind
Yeah.
of trying to evaluate it.
It's funny, because I would say most of the time you can switch off, but then you do. It's mostly like when you're listening to someone who's really good, and he's a really good narrator. And usually that means I don't think about the narrator at all. I'm just submerged. I'm hearing the
Mm.
story. But because it's my job, I'm sat there going like, they are incredible. So
You're
that's,
not criticizing, mostly you're learning from them.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I think like so. For instance, I'm a big fan of Mark Thompson, and his work is I think is among my favorites. And I can't listen to him without just being in awe, which I think defies the point of listening to it for enjoyment. But it's the same. I can think of a few people like Eduardo Bellerini being one of them as well. He's like so good. Vikas Adam. It's yeah, uh, just crazy. Yeah.
How's life in London?
But life's over here is okay. It's rainy and stuff, but it's yeah. So I'm a few hours north of London,
Okay.
and yeah, I live in the countryside by the water, which is nice. So I feel very
Beautiful idea.
yeah. I like living in the countryside because you're not in that sort of hustle and bustle. You're just on your own. You can think, you can breathe.
I like
Um,
that too. I like that too.
yeah. But life's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to know a little bit more about you, as a person, about your
Yeah.
childhood, about your family. I thought that would be good if that's something you are comfortable
Uh,
sharing. Did you grow up where you live right now?
I did, yes. I'm only about 20 minutes away from where I lived like my whole life.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I could break it down for you. I had a pretty happy childhood, and I was very, very fortunate because my parents were never one to force you into doing things that made you unhappy, which was quite a rarity around here. So it was like I was always as a child obsessed with the idea of doing what I wanted as a job. Like not as a, I wasn't like necessarily a selfish person, but I understood that you have to do things that you don't want to do. But the idea of like so many people around me would be so miserable from the way that they spent their day, and whether that be because it's underachieving or whether it's because of overachieving, they've got an amazing job and they get paid lots, but they're spending 100 hours a week being upset. And I wanted to try and find somewhere in the middle. So luckily, when I told my parents I don't want to do this like quote unquote normal stuff, they were like, well, go for it, you
Wonderful,
know? Yeah,
wonderful.
so
So
it
important to
was.
have supportive family, yeah.
Yeah, and it was but they were also that came with the condition, not like a negative condition, but it came with the condition that if you're going to do it, you got to try because it's hard. You can't just say that you want to be a voice actor or say whatever at that point it was I want to work in TV and film. It's like you can't just say that and then stay at home and sit on the couch. You've
Yeah,
got if you're going to do this, you've got to get out and do it. So
yeah.
and they were amazing. Like so, there's so many to get into a lot of the jobs that I did right at the start for working in films. You have to meet a lot of people, and it's a very much a networking place. And if you can get with the right people, they bring you from job to job to job. So my problem was that I didn't know anybody in the industry, so I went and found them, and my parents would drive me to events to meet them, and they were all over the country, like hours and hours. And I would go to a networking event, or I would go and do some volunteering, and they would, I'd say I've got to be in Manchester at 7 o'clock on Thursday morning, and my dad would go, "Okay, I'll drive you."
Thank you
So
for sharing it because some people
mm,
think your career is in this booth, where you
yeah,
spend most of
yeah.
the time narrating a book, but there's so much more to it.
Yeah, there is,
Business
and
you run.
yeah, and it's so I was so lucky, and I totally appreciate that not everybody has that at their disposal, um, but it was certainly of comfort to me, and but yeah, so I was very fortunate in that regard, to have a supportive family, and then
You
I
have
don't know if
wonderful
I've
family, and what do you enjoy doing besides your work, even though it's such a big part of your life?
yeah
Do you have any
usually.
hobbies?
Yeah, so any sort of time where I'm not working, it's usually spent actively trying not to think about it. That's something that I really struggle to switch off. if I'm being honest with you, and I'm always doing something to do with it. So yeah, if not, I like to travel a lot. Like I've been very fortunate in being able to go to a lot of places, and I'm very much, I like to come over to the States every now and again if I can and see friends, and to take a trip with my loved ones around Europe and things. And that's always like the nicest thing to do. I really like baseball as well. I play baseball at a local team, so yeah, I do that as well.
That's good. Let me ask you, as you know, I asked my guests, what does
Yeah.
kindness mean to you?
Yeah, I actually wrote an answer down because I wanted to be prepared. But this might be total waffle, but I think that kindness is accepting that we are all flawed, okay, and whether we mess up and reach the moon or don't even try in the first place, your right to be here is exactly the same as everyone, right? So it's an understanding, like human to human, that it's all of this life thing is just one big game, and at the end of it, we're all going back in the same box. All of the pieces, like Monopoly, go back in the same box, and it's done. So, like, I think it's that understanding of human to human, and whatever that other person is doing, sort of having that base level of respect of where the sort of same. So, if even in the sense of like, if somebody is being unkind or mean or however is, or obnoxious or some sort of negative quality, of sort of understanding, well, we all have a difficult, a lot of us have got difficult things going on. Some things obviously happen to that person to make them react in a certain way. So treating everyone as a base level and going, do you know what, I understand, it's fine, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
So I think that's true
It's
kindness.
like,
It's just
sounds like less judgment, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's an easy way of saying it. But
That's beautifully said. Thank you.
yeah, I think no, you're welcome. But yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I'll say not having judgment and just understanding is, I think that's the kindest thing that someone can do. Even if you don't and you fake it, I think it can go a long way to somebody's psyche of just going, yeah, I get it. Don't worry, it's fine.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And I wanted to say thank you very much for all the hard work you do for this podcast. I always appreciate it. It's perfect every time. Every time you do voiceover, it's perfect.
Oh,
They
thank you
say
so
there's
much.
no perfect, there is.
Oh, bless you. Well, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.